Ex cheated with her cousin and expected to save face? I think not. For context, it was her cousin-in-law. Let's start this story by saying this happened 12 years ago. I'm now happily married with 3 children and regret absolutely nothing. I was with my new ex for 3 years. I had noticed that she was being extremely controlling. I was expected to give every little detail of my day and tell her my schedule in advance. And if I deviated from that, she would be very upset. She chalked it up to just bad feelings she was having and shrugged it off as her paranoia for past relationships of infidelity. I had never once cheated or strayed, and I never gave her a reason to act like this. It felt unbecoming of my fiancé to act in such a way. Now this is where it gets juicy. After she had asked for my schedule to make plans, as mine tends to be more hectic than hers, I noticed she was texting someone. In my line of work, if I put in more than 40 hours, I have the ability to take time off at will as long as the work is completed at a later date. I was very good friends with a brother and still am. We laugh about this to this day, and he actively reminds her of it. I messaged him stating I wanted to do something special for her a little bit earlier than our anniversary to make sure it was a special surprise. They both worked in the same fabrication facility. He was a fabricator and she a shipping manager. He was kind enough to let me know her schedule. That's where the discrepancy falls into place. Without my knowledge, she was foregoing overtime. She worked 12-hour shifts Monday through Friday, with the exception of Wednesday, when she would only work half a day. She had been taking Wednesdays off right around the time that she started getting extremely controlling. Lucky for me, I had stacked several days of leisure time up, so taking a Wednesday off for me was not an issue. A few days go by, and Wednesday's here. I put on my work gear and leave for work. I was expecting her to leave as our apartment complex had 2 exits on the same road I could see, directly across from a shopping center, so I parked my car near the back and waited. After about an hour, I noticed a very specific red Mustang with a specific decal on the back window. It was her cousin by marriage. I had also done my due diligence to take an old laptop, which we kept on our desk in an office area with a full view of the living room, bedroom door and bathroom plus the kitchen. I had set it up for remote access and had it alert me when the webcam noticed movement, giving her the benefit of the doubt. I thought he may be dropping something off or coming over to assist her with something, as her family sometimes does. Sure enough, a message came through, so I remote into my laptop. He walks through the door without skipping a beat. She unbuttons his shirt and begins kissing him. I created a URL link for the live stream, and as she was preoccupied, we had a family group text and a friend group text. They were both part of it, but at the current time, they were currently indisposed and didn't look at their phones. They didn't even wait. They could have gone to the bedroom, but no. They decided to get freaky deaky right there on the couch. I sent the link off to the friend group chat and the family group chat. Within minutes, I'm getting calls non-stop from friends and family alike. There was no turning back. She was getting blown up, but she was ignoring her phone. Not until the 4th or 5th call came through did they decide to take a break. For context, the state I live in allows recording of personal property regardless of occupancy. I was the only one on the lease. She wasn't allowed to be on the lease because of poor credit. The call she had picked up was from her cousin's mother who she was banging. She answers the phone on speaker, and I kid you not, the first words out of his mother's mouth were, "Stop fucking my son." They both became rigid, and she began to stutter over her words, saying, "What are you talking about?" etc. The mother then divulged that there was a live feed of them sent out by me to her family. She grabbed every pillow off the couch and covered herself up. The cousin staggered off, trying to put on his pants and shoes, just to trip himself up and bang his head off of my coffee table, leaving it with a divot. By this time, I had made my way to the front of the apartment complex. I was there to greet the adulterer as he came out of the front exit. He froze and began to cry, apologizing profusely. I'm not going to lie, what happened afterwards wasn't my best moment, and I nearly got into legal trouble. If it weren't for the fact that he was trespassing on private property. Let's just say I had a cast for 6 weeks, and he wasn't in any family photos for months. I went up to the apartment, where she was now fully clothed and crying inconsolably. I asked her if it was snot or cum on her face. Then I told her not to answer because it didn't matter anyway. I gave her 1 hour to remove all her belongings, as again, everything in the apartment was mine except for clothes, some makeup, and a few kitchen utensils. Her mother would not let her move in, as she was just filled with embarrassment. Same for her brothers, and the cousin's mother kicked her son out. Rumors spread around our town very quickly, and for lack of better words, she was untouchable. Edited supplying proof for the naysayers. Eat your heart out. I couldn't find my digital scan of the theft of property from my cat. My apologies. Guy behind me in traffic was blinding me in traffic with his high beams, so I violated his retinas with the full force of an afternoon sun. I was driving home from work and traffic was backed up pretty badly for a few miles. It was stop and go. When I get stuck in that, I'll usually back about 75 feet off the car in front of me so that I can hold a pace and move at a slow but constant roll like the semi-trucks do. This way I'm not participating in the bumper-to-bumper move and brake like the rest of the smooth brain drivers. Some dude in an Acura crossover was behind me, and I guess he was getting upset because I wasn't 2 feet from the car in front of me, driving like a smooth brain. So he gets up on my butt and starts beeping his horn at me. Lol, I think to myself as I turn up my radio. But then he starts flashing his brights at me, which is where I get annoyed. He's in one of those Acuras that has the super bright LED headlights. My car is much lower than his, so his low beams are already pretty bright in my mirrors. Bright enough that I don't want to look in them. The first time he flashed his high beams, it put spots in my vision for a moment. It genuinely hurt my eyes. After the first flash, he waits for about 10 seconds, beeps his horn, and then flashes me again. Now I'm getting pissed. I'm thinking, where the fuck do you want me to go? Do you really think being 2 feet from the car in front of you will make traffic move faster? Then he flashes me a third time, but this time he held them on for about 15 seconds. Time for the gloves to come off. During those 15 seconds, as I'm looking away from my mirrors, I see my 14,000 lumen searchlight sitting in my passenger seat, at which point I'm immediately overcome by a wave of chaotic lawful excitement. What he has just set in motion cannot be stopped. I think to myself, oh, just opened the wrong can of worms. You're gonna learn today. I grabbed the flashlight and set it to its absolute max 14,000 lumen brightness setting. The flashlight has a sensor in it to automatically dim the light if facing down on a table, because otherwise the diodes would get so hot they would melt the lens. The 14,000 lumen setting is so intense, the 57 watt-hour battery can only hold it for 180 seconds before the flashlight automatically notches down to a measly 9,500 lumens. During those 180 seconds, the light will burn through 15 of its battery power. For reference on just how bright this is, the literal fucking sun emits a luminosity of 11,000 lumens per square foot on a bright and clear day. I turn around and aim it straight out the back of my rear window. My car is pretty noisy, so before I turn it on, I rev up my engine to make sure Captain Smoothbrain is eyes forward when I violate his retinas. With the full force of an afternoon sun, I hit the power button and can only imagine the freight train of shock and pain that plowed over this man. It was so bright, his automatic headlights shut off because the car thought it was daytime. With the light on, I could see him clear as glass through his tinted windshield. He was covering his eyes and looking down, probably screaming. I watched him try and flip down his sun visor, but his hand couldn't find it, as I thought to myself, burn you. I imagine my facial expression was similar to that of a 6-year-old roasting insects with a magnifying glass on a bright summer day. After about 5 seconds of blinding light, I took mercy and shut it off. He proceeded to back way the hell off and move over to a different lane. Was this an unsafe thing for me to do? Absolutely. Was this illegal? Almost certainly. Was it warranted? Without question. Possibly the highlight of my year. Drive safe, and don't be a dick to the car in front of you, because they might just have the tools to teach you a lesson. Story 2. I blew up a romance scammer's life. This one is fresh and still unfolding, but it's already hit an explosive level. Some details intentionally vague. Context: I'm a woman in my 30s with a reasonably good corporate type job in a field with lots of room for growth, and am recently back into the dating scene after a decade. I'm kind of a would be a 10 if she lost 30 pounds looking girl. Beautiful face if a bit chubby. But I never have issues getting a date, lol. I'm not well off, but I'm stable and have a bit of spending money. I live in a large multicultural city and my ex was an immigrant, so I'm open to dating people of any origin. If it wasn't abundantly clear, this bit about my appearance is a joke, and only speaks to his failure to select an appropriate victim. I don't care what people think about how I look. What happened a few weeks ago, I met a very charming man from a Latin American country only a couple years younger than me. Seemed very sweet, cuddly, intelligent, family-oriented, emotionally available, educated and in a good profession back home in his country, and had a lot in common with me. Chemistry seemed amazing inside and outside the bedroom. He was honest that he was in my country on a tourist visa but hoping to stay. I made it clear I wouldn't be able to help him with that, but we'd have a fun summer fling while he was here. If he managed to stay or come back, only then would we consider a real relationship. Then the other shoe dropped. A couple weeks and for dates and during a text conversation about my work, he asked me to be his sugar mommy. I initially laughed and assumed it was a joke. He kept pushing and clearly said it wasn't. Of course, feeling insulted by this, I went off on him. He maintained it as a serious ask until I hit a nerve with my complaints about how embarrassed he should be to ask me that. Then he got angry and insulted me for thinking he was serious about it. No apology for being hurtful to me. Obviously, what I did next was take screenshots and cry about it to my closest friends. I was hurt that I was fooled into thinking he liked me and that he thought I needed to pay for a man. My friends started the fuse on what happened next. One of my friends started snooping more on his online presence. Together we found about 6 different Instagram accounts that were him using different variations of his name and different photos of himself, all uploaded in batches. On Facebook, a similar pattern, all very scammy and suspicious looking. He'd been foolish enough on one of his profiles though to follow and tag the employer that he was working for illegally on his tourist visa in my country. So I contacted another close friend in a local law enforcement agency that works with immigration. She looked up his file. He had a wife and daughter at home. I released the hounds after that. The friend who helped me investigate online made several group chats on multiple platforms with all of his family, immediate and extended and friends. She released all the screenshots as well as a rant about how shameful it was. As they started blocking her, she added more people. I found his sister's phone number. She sent her messages on there too. Everyone he knows, including his wife, know he's unfaithful and trying to take advantage of women. 30 minutes after the online bombardment started, I got a rude message from him about how I should be smart enough to know he was joking and he doesn't need to sell himself. I didn't reply. Next step, online immigration reporting form with all the info we found: work info, employer name and address, his home address, full name, job, photos, screenshots admitting to working. Usually these reports take months to be reviewed if at all, but I gave the file number to my law enforcement friend. 2 days later, law enforcement officers visited him at home. They found him with a phone number that was issued to a local resident. All his roommates also had numbers issued to the same person, a direct link to the employer. He received a caution for trying to scam me, a no-contact order and a flag on his immigration file that based on his country of origin will likely mean he can never return, as well as a strict warning to not work without authorization. His roommates also received warnings. His employer received a visit next. They found significant proof that they'd been employing him illegally as well as multiple other people. Their investigation is still ongoing, but so far they are likely to receive tens of thousands in fines or possible jail time. The guy isn't getting deported because the government would have to pay for it and proceedings take longer than his remaining visa time, but he's now upgraded from a flagged file to a multi-year ban on re-entry to my country. If he bothers me again though, he will be deported as well. Hope he enjoys going back to his angry wife and the ridicule from everyone he knows. See ya again never. EDIT this was approved first on Per Revenge.
Story 3.
Grandma's Revenge. Okay, so disclaimer on mobile. Writing in a rush. This story was relayed to me by grandparents, so it may be embellished. Yada yada, let's get to the story. I immediately have to write this down because it is the most amazing thing I have ever heard. I was visiting my grandma and grandpa to celebrate a bunch of summer birthdays together, but when I pulled up to their house, the plot to the right was completely empty, as in no stones, no base, no debris, just slightly overgrown grass. Grass where there used to be a house. When the hellos were said and the party started, I absolutely had to know what happened, so I went to ask my grandparents, and goodness gracious, I was not expecting the roller coaster of a story they told me. A couple of years ago, my grandparents had some very unpleasant neighbors. Loud at all hours, trash in the yard, arguing with other people on the street, just absolute nuisances. It was a husband and wife, and their adult son who would come and go irregularly. The wife would get into arguments with anyone about anything, and the husband would physically intimidate the people who spoke up for themselves. They weren't sure what exactly was the deal with the son, but it couldn't have been anything good, as it was well known he had been in the county jail more than a few times. The house apparently reflected the tenants, as it looked awful. It was sagging and dilapidated, loose beams and peeling paint, but nothing was ever done about it due to the guy who rented out the place being a slumlord. We'll get to him later. It all came to a breaking point one night when my grandparents returned home to find their back door smashed in and some of my grandpa's guitars missing. Now Grandpa loves his music, and has been singing and playing his whole life, so it's safe to say those guitars are not only very memorable to him, but damn expensive too. They of course went to the police, and after some digging they found that the guitars had been sold at a pawn shop or someplace by the son. They couldn't get the guitars back unfortunately, but I believe my grandparents were fairly compensated since the guitars were insured till guitars have insurance. Given how expensive the guitars were, the theft was absolutely a felony and the son once again ended up in jail. After that, the neighbors would harass my grandparents through the fence or on their porch, meaning it was difficult for them to even sit outside. They would call them foul names, throw trash over the fence, and the husband would still try to get physical. Now while my grandpa is a very chill and mellow guy, my grandma will take shit from no one, especially not jerks like these. So what did she do? She got the house condemned. It was easy for her to do, really. She called the local authorities, general attorney, property manager, I don't know, and they came and did an inspection, though it was clear by the outside of the house that it hadn't been properly maintained for a long time. One call led to more calls, and the property was deemed unfit to live in, which forced the rude neighbors to move out. I'm not sure what happened to them or where they went, but supposedly they were put up in a nearby hotel by the slumlord until the house could be fixed. Ooh, foreshadowing. Now enter the slumlord. Of course his tenants told him who had reported the house, so of course he's upset with my grandparents. Rather than fix the house though, he gets aggressive the first day he's there, yelling at my grandparents about how they're idiots for reporting him and how they've cost him a bunch of money and he's gonna sue them and on and on. It gets to the point where the across the street neighbors call the local police to come defuse the situation, which they do. A few weeks pass and my grandma hasn't seen the slumlord or anyone around to fix the house. Not being one to let things go easily, grandma starts making frequent calls to a bunch of services, reporting the house and its lack of progress. Each time, the slumlord's truck would appear for a day, and then leave without changing a thing. Grandpa said he would block in their driveway, but since they stay home most of the time, it wasn't a major issue. Grandma disagreed. Finally, my grandma have complained enough that officials came out and condemned the house for demolition. This had two major effects. First, the rude neighbors were now practically homeless, since as soon as they and the slumlord ran out of money to pay for the hotel, they'd be stranded. Second, the slumlord still had to pay a shitload of fines for the state of the house. The rest is more his fault than my grandma's actions, but he would refuse to pay and refuse to show up in court, leading to a warrant being put out for his arrest. A few months ago, the demolition teams came and tore down the place, leaving the lot perfectly barren. They even removed the driveway, so now it just looks like an extension of the side yard. My grandparents were not sure of the final state of the neighbors and slumlord, but my grandma looked very pleased with herself as she finished her story. I loved her so much.
Story 4.
I ruined my boss life. A few years ago, I worked for a couple of months in a pastry shop. To work there, my boss promised me 8 hours a day except Mondays half day and Thursdays closed and €700 a month, obviously all off the books. Although I had some resentment about working illegally, I accepted anyway because I needed some money. The first day of work, I was in there for 11 hours, from 5:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. and then from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. I thought it was normal since it was my first day, even if in reality some doubts came to me right away because all the others had been there as much as me and for them it was certainly not the first day. The situation continued to be this, hours ranging from 10 to sometimes 13 hours a day. Furthermore, for 2 weeks in a row, on Monday, the day on which we were only supposed to work in the morning, we instead worked with the schedules of the other days. At the end of the month, I asked for my well-deserved salary and my boss got angry telling me that I was only thinking about money when in reality I hadn't even asked him to pay me for the multiple hours of overtime. He then told me that he would pay everyone at the end of the first week of the following month. The following day, after working as usual for 11 hours, at the end of the shift he called me aside telling me that since I had been presumptuous I had to show up for work on Thursday even though it was my day off. Obviously I got angry and replied that I had worked much longer hours than those agreed and that I would not show up for work on my day off, and so I did. Thursday came and I didn't show up, ignoring hundreds of calls from my boss and his wife. The next day, I showed up for work regularly and was severely reprimanded and then sent home for bad behavior. He told me that we would meet on Sunday to give me the money and then I didn't have to show up again, which I already wanted to do. So Sunday arrived and showed up with €300, telling me that I had done little this month and that I hadn't been respectful towards him and his business. I got very angry and also went to call my father who was waiting for me in the car. The two almost came to blows. So I took my father and we left, saying it wasn't over there. I kept in touch with some of my colleagues, some even over 18, with whom I had established a good relationship and who also worked illegally. They told me that, the next day, He had badmouthed me saying that I was a person without any form of respect and dignity. In Italy we say una cosa e inutile. They had witnessed the scene the previous Friday and were speechless. They thought I had to do something and not let me walk on my head like this. And they were right. So I decided to do something that no one has ever had the courage or the will to do. Or rather go to finance to denounce the fact that he made most of his employees work illegally and that he exploited them by underpaying them. Obviously not alone, but with my colleagues also tired of being exploited to support me. So we decided on a day and time for a pop check and waited. The agreed day was Saturday morning from 9 to 10. The day and time when there was usually more workload. It goes without saying that, contrary to what is thought of in Italy, sometimes justice works, and that day finance with a surprise check discovered the whole situation and immediately closed the business. Subsequently the owner as well as my former boss was investigated and sentenced to I don't remember how many years in prison. The business was seized and now his family is having to pay more than €1 million in tax evasion for other reasons related to false receipts and other things that I don't quite understand. I'm publishing this also here because a lot of people told me to publish this here. Non so perché continuo a togliere il 18. Email o rimet porcaxi la Madonna.